Uhlmann reporting for Katie Chats here at Smithy TV in downtown Toronto with BRIAN GORDON SINCLAIR, who has been named the foremost dramatic interpreter of Ernest Hemingway in the world today by the Stratford-upon-Avon Herald in England. What initially sparked your interest in Ernest Hemingway?
Many years ago, my mother passed away, and she was born in Ireland. I discovered at that time that I had dual citizenship. I was born in Canada, but because of her birthright, I had Irish citizenship. I asked someone, well, all right, so where's my Irish citizenship card? They said, there is no such thing. Well, how do I prove it? You get a passport. So I decided to explore my roots, went to Ireland, got the passport, which has the added advantage of being a European Union passport, and that allows you to work and travel in all of those countries. And I fell in love with the Republican rebels in Dublin, and in particular the story of the 1916 uprising when the British attacked Dublin, and the rebels lost that particular battle, but eventually it led to the Republic of Ireland and freedom from Great Britain. I wrote a one-actor play about that story and performed it. In fact, I performed it for Jerry Adams of Sinn Féin and several people connected with the old IRA. Not the type who do strange things to your kneecaps. They've all become much more peaceful than that. But I had such a great time doing that that I wanted to play another character that I considered a hero. It was at that time that I picked up a copy of Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, his book about World War I. People who know Hemingway know that he was wounded in that war. And Hemingway himself said that in the broken places you get stronger. Well, he had a lot of broken places because they pulled 227 pieces of shrapnel out of Ernest Hemingway. While he was getting all that shrapnel in his body, he managed to pick up another soldier and actually carry that person to safety. He was incredibly heroic. Hemingway's reputation to many people is that of a womanizing drunken lout. And some of that's true, but much of it is a media creation. Particularly after the Second World War, there were a series of men's magazines called Safari and True Adventure and Argosy, and they like to write stories. They just made them up.
What do you think is the most interesting thing about Hemingway that you've learned that maybe not the regular average person might know?
Well, in portraying him now in 7 plays, actually, from birth, I didn't have a costume for that part, to death, I think I was overwhelmed by the compassion of the man. Underneath everything, he had a great sense of humor, and he always listened to people. He said the most important thing is to listen. I think that's how he managed to draw so much inside and put it out in his writing. But there's one incident that I've used, a line he wrote, and it's become almost a model for my own life. In the early years, while he was in Paris learning his craft, he became friends with a couple named George and Sarah Murphy, who were rather wealthy, and they would take Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, other people to their seaside villa. And the Murphy's son, Booth, became sick from tuberculosis and eventually died. And Ernest wrote them the warmest letter saying what most of us already know, that when someone dies, I can't say anything to the relative of that person that's going to make them feel better at the time. They're in pain and they're suffering and they're grieving. But it was the last line that moved me after explaining all of this and saying he would still help in any way. He said, and I've adapted the line slightly, and I use it in my plays. The line is, all we can do is to live it now, a day at a time, and be very careful not to hurt each other. And the first half of it is almost like the Alcoholics' Creed, live it a day at a time. And the second half is like the Hippocratic Oath, hurt no one, do no harm.
And where did you get most of your material? What sources did you use?
Well, two approaches. One, you read everything you can get on Hemingway. Two, I got some grants that allowed me to travel when I was doing the research. So I went to Key West because that, for me, that seemed the easiest place to start. He lived there for 10 years. And ironically, while in Key West, a friend said, oh, they're having a young Hemingway look-alike contest for the first time ever. I just had a mustache at that time. Their normal contest was for the older, gray-bearded fellows, and a young kid like me wasn't interested in that. So I let myself be talked into the Young Hemingway contest. I won, and they put $500 in my hand. I came back to Canada, looked up the prices to go to Havana. Oh, $600. So it cost me $100 extra for an all-expense trip down there, where I visited the Hemingway Museum, because he lived in Cuba for 20 years and is a hero there now. I also went to Oak Park, Michigan, where he was born, just on the outskirts of Chicago. So they have a museum. The birthplace home was restored. I studied that area. I actually stood in the high school classroom that he sat in while he was a student there. And I went to London and saw where he went to an aerodrome and saw where he flew RAF missions on B-52 bombers with the Royal Air Force. I traveled to Venice, where he wrote one of his books, and stayed very close. Sat in Harry's Bar in Venice, where Hemingway invented the Montgomery Martini. That was. Did
you drink one?
Well, I did, but I don't do that anymore. I'm reformed. My doctor tells me I better be reformed too. The Montgomery Martini is a cute little story. Hemingway and several others disliked Bernard Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, for the British, and felt that he always dragged things back. So the Montgomery Martini was 15 parts gin, and you might as well take an eyedropper for 1 part vermouth. And the reason for that was because Montgomery would never go into battle unless he had a 15-to-1 advantage, and most of the time he never had it, so that made the war drag on a lot. Wow. So they still serve to this day in Harry's Bar in Venice, the Montgomery Martini. Yeah.
And you also studied at the National Theater School, and you have a master's from the University of Denver, and you studied at the National Film Board as well. How did all of those experiences prepare you for your life in the theater?
Well, I think now everything that is in your background finally gels for you at some point. When I was younger, of course, 1 or 2 people told me I was a decent actor, but I think it's in this latter part of my life that I feel I've really come into my own. There are stages of acting. I always say there are 5 stages. The first one is ego. If you don't have some kind of ego need, you're never up on stage in the first place. That just gets you there. Then there's what I call amateur love and passion, where you might be doing the high school plays or community theater and really falling in love with it. Then there's the serious training and the movement towards really developing that passion that you have to have. Then you're out in the world practicing and moving towards mastery, and then finally there's something that I call transcendence, where you have incorporated so much of the acting into your being, your knowledge, your awareness, that it has nothing to do with training or nothing to do with acting anymore. You start being whatever you do in a way that most people can't quite do when they're younger. So there's so much of me mixed in with Hemingway now that in one sense you could say I don't know where one stops and the other begins, but it is an interesting transcendence whereby you also offer the performance not because of the same ego need, but because of the desire to share some knowledge with others.
And you're also the artistic director of the Children of Erin Theater Company. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, actually, that was just a bit of a tax situation. I have strictly been almost a one-actor operation. I used to travel with projections and sound equipment and would have a technician. And in various places, I would hire 3 or 4 people to help work the crew, front of house, that type of thing. So Children of Erin was simply an umbrella title under which to put the business operation. And that, of course, came from the fact that I told you I was Irish, and I am the child of Erin. But it's amazing the number of people look at it and say, oh, you have a children's theater company. No, it's just me. I am the child of Erin.
And what are your goals for the future?
Well, I do a lot of work with Cuba now. For instance, I performed my last play, which is called In Deadly Earnest. A little pun on the name Ernest. The Spanish translation is Adios Ernesto. There's no way to translate that pun into Spanish. But that had its world premiere in the Ambos Mundos Hotel in Havana as part of the Museo Hemingway colloquium 2 years ago. And we were attended by all the delegates who came to the colloquium, many scholars, many professors, and I'm very fortunate that the Canadian government assists me a little bit when I travel. So the Canadian ambassador to Cuba and his staff attended the show. I recently performed at the University of Holguin in Holguin, Cuba. I'm leaving in just a couple of days for Florida, the Florida Humanities Council, and right after that it's back to Cuba, to Santiago de Cuba at the Universidad de Oriente in Santiago. And there are 2 things at play there. One is because Hemingway lived in Cuba for 20 years, he became, as far as they were concerned, Cuban. In fact, he once said, "Yo soy un cubano sato." I am a mischievous little Cuban. And the other thing at play, aside from their great love of Hemingway as one of their own, is the universities, of course, have an English studies department, and all the students are obviously practicing their English. And what better way for them to practice than to bring me in and to do an English-speaking play, and afterwards we can discuss it in English. I always have a Spanish translator handy just in case I run into trouble explaining something. So that's going to continue. There are a variety of festivals there. I had the great pleasure of being taken to Santiago a year ago. Outside of Santiago is what is called the Alcobra Sanctuary. Ernest Hemingway in 1954 won the Nobel Prize medal and donated it to the people of Cuba. It was taken to the sanctuary and put on display there. In the 1980s, somebody stole that medal. But the local people knew who had taken it. So the word was sent to a certain person. I won't tell you what his name was, but his last name starts with the initial C. And I'll bet you can guess. Well, Mr. C, El Jefe, sent a message back. And the message was very simple. We know who you are. If the medal is not returned in 72 hours, you will not be returned. The next morning, the medal reappeared magically at the church. But it was in the care of the Archbishop of Santiago, so the Archbishop decided this was too valuable an item to leave on display and took it into safekeeping and put it in a safe. Approximately a year ago, I was invited to the Archbishop of Santiago's office, and I had written a little scene where I talk about depositing the medal and kneeling at the feet of the patron saint of Cuba, who is in that church. And I played this little scene there, actually using the real medal. And I don't know of anyone else who's, the only other person I know who's touched that in the last 3 or 4 decades, aside from the thieves and the Archbishop, is Mariel Hemingway, the granddaughter, one of the granddaughters of Ernest Hemingway. So I consider that a great honor and a great sign of respect for my work being allowed down there.
Absolutely. And where is the best place to find out more information on you and all the exciting work that you do online?
Well, I must admit I'm a little lazy about keeping my website up to date, which is just my name, BRIANGORDONSINCLAIR.com. And thank you for asking that, because I'll get home and call my webmaster and say, let's get to work on this. But otherwise, I keep an open page with the new timeline on Facebook, and most people can go there and they'll find out that I'm performing for the Florida Humanities Council on February the 13th, and they'll find out that on March the 3rd I land in Santiago de Cuba.
Well, thank you so much. Congratulations on all of your success, and best of luck with your upcoming shows.
Well, thank you, Katie, and I want to wish the same amount of luck to you. I think what you do is terrific. And if we can just take an extra minute, I know a woman who started from scratch and with something called the Hemingway Project. And what she does is interview everybody, not just me, but everybody in the whole world that she can get to who's had any connection or knows anything about Ernest Hemingway. And she's now talked to so many people. There's an incredible book there. And the fact that you're talking to so many people, and I see you're going to be in Los Angeles too, I think that's wonderful. And I can't wait to see the book that you're going to write about all of these things.
Thank you. And does that lady have a website or somewhere where people who know about Hemingway can get in touch with her?
I think if they just typed the Hemingway Project into a search engine, that would lead them right there.
Wow. Thank you so much, and congratulations again. And I'll have to check out the Hemingway Project online as well.
That's great. It's my pleasure.
I'm Katie Uhlmann reporting for Katie Chats here at SMITHEE TV in downtown Toronto.